The stars looked peaceful from orbit, but peace was a lie now. War had erupted between the human colonies and the Varelian Empire, a race known for cruelty, silence, and assassins that never missed. Among them was the galaxy's most feared killer, a purple-skinned alien woman known only by a whisper, Zara. Captain Rian Vale sat on the edge of the steel command bench, watching the sensor feeds. His unit had lost contact with Outpost Echo 7 2 hours ago. No distress call. No survivors on scan. He knew what that meant. Zara had been sent. He tightened his gloves and checked the charge on his sidearm. The soldiers around him were quiet. They had seen the aftermath of her work before necks snapped, bloodless corpses, no signs of struggle. Fear traveled faster than facts in war, and her name was already a ghost among the troops. This mission wasn't like others. Rian wasn't hunting rebels or scouting terrain. He was the bait. Command wanted to capture the assassin alive, study her, dissect her. If needed, they had said. But Rian had seen death before, and he knew one thing: some creatures were better left untamed. The dropship touched down in the burned remains of Echo 7. Silence ruled the ground. Buildings half melted from plasma fire. Ash blowing through the wind. But the bodies were placed carefully. Every soldier's eyes were still open. Faces peaceful, as if they had been put to rest after a lullaby. He moved through the wreckage, slow and steady. His heart was steady but heavy. He wasn't sure if he was hunting a monster or waiting to die. His boots crunched on metal fragments as a shadow flickered across the flame-lit walls behind him. Then he heard it. Not footsteps, but a hum. Low, sharp, vibrating through the air like a thread pulled tight. He turned and saw her. Purple skin glowing in the firelight, eyes like molten gold. Her armor shimmered black, edged in silver, shaped like it grew out of her flesh. In her hand a blade the length of his forearm. She didn't speak. She didn't run. She only looked at him, tilting her head slightly, like a cat watching a mouse that hadn't realized it was in danger yet. Rian raised his hands. No weapon drawn, his fingers open in peace. "I'm not here to fight," he said, voice calm. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped forward slowly, blade aimed at his chest. Still no words, but her movements were poetry, deadly, flawless. She could strike at any moment, yet she hesitated. Rian didn't understand why. He should be dead already. "You killed them gently," he said, motioning around the base. "You made it painless. Why?" She flinched, just slightly. Enough for him to know she had heard. Her eyes stayed locked on his, glowing brighter in the smoke-filled air. Finally, her voice came, smooth, cold, clear. "Orders do not ask why. Orders are followed." It was the first time any human had heard her speak. The voice didn't match. The blade, it was too soft, too human. Rian was surprised, but he didn't let it show. "You don't look like a killer," he said gently. "You look like something the stars would carve with pride." Her hand tightened on the blade, but her expression wavered. A flicker of confusion. Or was it pain, or disbelief? He wasn't sure. Zara didn't strike. She just stood there, breathing. Slow, eyes unreadable. Rian could hear his own heart louder than her steps. And still he kept speaking. "You're beautiful," he said. Not as a trick, not to buy time, he meant it. The deadliest being he had ever faced was also the most haunting. Her blade trembled slightly. It was the first imperfection in her stance. She looked down at it, then back at him. "Why would a man compliment death?" she whispered. Her voice was cracked, like something breaking beneath her armor. "Because even death can be kind," he said. "Because maybe there's more to you than orders and silence." She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Time held them both in place. Rian's eyes didn't leave hers. He saw something inside them change. She stepped forward. Close. Too close. The blade touched the front of his jacket, pressing lightly. One push and it would slide in, but her hand dropped. The dagger clinked to the floor, her lips parted. "No one has ever said that to me," she said, softer than before. For the first time, the galaxy's deadliest assassin looked unsure. Her body still looked like a weapon, but her eyes had lost focus. She blinked, slowly, like trying to understand the feeling crawling beneath her skin. It wasn't rage. It wasn't orders. It was something new. Rian didn't move. He didn't need to. Something told him she wouldn't kill him anymore. Not tonight. She was still dangerous. Still sharp. But there was a softness leaking through her steel. And in that moment, the war outside faded. It was just them, surrounded by silence and ash. Zara looked up toward the burning sky, as if waiting for a command that didn't come. Her voice returned. "What do I do now, human?" she asked, not in anger, not in threat, but in confusion. As if she had never made a choice before. As if she didn't know how to live without being told. Zara stood in the ruins of Echo 7, staring at her hands. They had always been weapons. Now they felt empty. The human had not only survived her blade, but he had said something that left a crack in her mind. A single word kept repeating, beautiful. No one had ever called her that. She was made to be feared, trained to kill, shaped by Varelian science into a perfect weapon. She didn't know what beauty even meant. But the way he looked at her, calm and without fear, made her question everything she had been told. Rian slowly reached down and picked up the dagger she had dropped. He held it out to her, handle first. "You forgot this," he said gently. Zara didn't take it. Her eyes flicked from the blade to his face, searching for a trick. But there was none. He wasn't mocking her. He was sincere. She turned her back to him, not out of trust, but confusion. She didn't know how to handle this human. He was not like the others she had faced. They always fought, always screamed, always begged. This one spoke softly and didn't flinch at death. "Why? Do you speak to me like I am not your enemy?" she asked without looking. Rian stepped forward, slowly, watching her shoulders tense. "Because maybe you don't want to be my enemy," he said. "And maybe I don't want to be yours." Zara clenched her fists. The instincts drilled into her, screamed to turn and strike. But her body didn't move. The warmth in his voice clashed with the cold in her training. She had never hesitated in battle before. But now she was hesitating again and again. Rian walked past her and sat on a chunk of broken steel. The air smelled of ash and melted circuits. He looked up at the sky, where two moons peeked through black clouds. "You're not here to finish the mission, are you?" he asked. She said nothing. Silence had always been her shield, but it didn't work on this human. He saw through it. He saw her. Zara crossed her arms, staring at the broken barracks. The mission was to erase the outpost, all humans. "I completed it," she said. Rian nodded slowly. "But you didn't kill me. You were supposed to, right?" She turned toward him, eyes sharp again. "Yes, you were part of the target group, but you said something that made no sense. No one ever says that to someone holding a blade." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why it worked," she frowned. "Explain." Rian looked at her, straight in the eyes. "Because if someone can look at you and still see something more than a weapon, maybe you can too." Her breath caught. Something in his words hit deeper than she expected. She remembered the faces of those she had killed, some afraid, some brave, none kind. But this one had offered kindness when she expected fear. It was unnatural. It was dangerous. Suddenly, her cum crackled. A sharp voice spoke in Varelian code. "Report status. Eliminate remaining target." Zara froze. She had not answered. The last 2 reports. They would send backup if she didn't comply. She glanced at Rian. He saw the flash of panic in her eyes. "Is that your command?" he asked. "They want me dead?" She nodded once. "They know you're alive. They gave me one last order." Rian didn't move. "What will you do?" he asked, voice steady. Zara looked down at her hands again. They still trembled, not with fear, with choice. For the first time, she could say no. But saying no meant being hunted. Abandoned. Executed by her own kind. Varelian assassins did not retire. They were recycled. "I have no place outside of orders," she said, voice distant. "I was made for war. Built for death. If I do not kill you, they will erase me." Rian stood up slowly. "Then stay with me," he said. "I'm not part of your empire. I don't care what they built you for." Her head snapped toward him. "You would shelter a killer?" He nodded. "If the killer chooses to be something else." The words hit her harder than any weapon. Something in her chest tightened. She didn't know if it was pain or hope. She turned off the comm. Just like that, the voice stopped. The connection was severed. A simple act, but her heart pounded like she had leapt off a cliff. "I just betrayed my people," she said, stunned. "I chose you over them." Rian walked closer and gently touched her armored shoulder. She didn't pull away. "Then we run," he said. "Together, they'll come for us. But they won't find you alone." Zara looked at his hand then. At her own. "This is new to me," she whispered. He smiled again. "It's new to me too." For a moment, there was no war. No orders. Just the 2 of them standing in a burned city, surrounded by silence and smoke. 2 enemies who were no longer enemies. 2 weapons who had chosen peace. And somewhere far above, a Varelian command ship received no signal, no confirmation. Number. Body, only silence. The kind that meant failure or defiance. Or something far more dangerous than death. A change that could not be undone. The wind howled across the barren hills as Zira and Rian moved away from the smoldering remains of Echo 7. They traveled on foot through night and ash, sticking to the shadows between the broken trees and jagged rocks. The sky was dark, but inside Zira's mind, something had started to glow. For most of her life, she had moved like a shadow, silent, swift, alone. Now she was beside someone. She was not ordered to kill him. She was not dragging him in chains. She walked with him freely. It made her feel strange. It made her feel alive. Rian didn't ask many questions. He walked with steady steps, carrying a small pack of supplies. Every now and then, he glanced at her, not with fear, but curiosity. He didn't treat her like a monster or a machine. He treated her like someone who had a choice. They stopped near a crumbled structure that used to be a fuel depot. The roof was gone, but some walls remained. It was a place to rest. Zara scanned the area first, her senses sharp, her hearing tuned to every leaf and breath. Then she nodded once. It was safe enough. Rian sat down on a chunk of metal. He took out a protein bar and offered one to Zira. She hesitated, then accepted. Varelians didn't eat human rations, but she tried it anyway. The taste was dry, bitter, but oddly comforting. It felt like sharing something small that mattered. "You've killed hundreds, haven't you?" Rian asked softly. He wasn't accusing her. He wasn't judging. He was just trying to understand. Zara looked at her hands. "Yes," she said. "Too many to count. I never remembered their faces." "Only the number," Rian nodded slowly. "And now you remember mine." Zara didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence told him everything. He leaned back against the cold stone wall and looked up at the cracked moonlight above them. "I don't know why I trust you," he admitted. Zira's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Because you see something that isn't supposed to be there. Rian turned his head toward her. What's that? She looked down at him, her face unreadable. A heart, she said. Inside a weapon. He smiled a little. I think there's more than that. She blinked. Like what? Rian's voice was quiet. Like someone who doesn't want to be alone anymore. Zira looked away. She didn't know how to answer. The truth was too close. In the silence. A faint click echoed in the distance. Zira stood immediately. Her hand went to her second blade. Her body shifted into alert mode. Drone, she whispered. Rian froze. Varelian, she nodded. Scout class. They've started tracking us. A silver eye floated through the ruined trees. Small, fast, quiet. It scanned the area, unaware it was already marked. Zira moved like a ghost, blade in hand, and leapt onto the wall. In one swift motion, she hurled the blade. The drone sparked and dropped. She returned to Rian's side, breathing steady. They know I disobeyed. The hunt has started. Rian stood up and packed the food. Then we keep moving. Where can we go that they won't find us? Zira looked toward the distant mountains. There's an old rebel tunnel network. Abandoned. They won't scan it. They traveled through the night, passing through burned fields and shattered stone. The war had touched every corner of the land. But this time, the footsteps left behind weren't marks of invasion. They were the path of a killer choosing a new fate. Rian stumbled once over a cracked beam. Zira caught him with one hand. He looked up at her, surprised. She had touched him gently, like she was afraid of hurting him. You're stronger than you look, he said, breathless. She didn't let go right away. You're softer than I thought, she replied, not as an insult, but as a fact. For a moment, they stayed like that. Her fingers against his jacket. His hand brushing her arm. Two people from enemy worlds, learning what it meant to feel something more than survival. They reached the mouth of the cave just before sunrise. A narrow entrance, half buried in rubble, hidden from satellites. Zira scanned it twice, then motioned for Rian to follow. Inside was darkness, but it was the kind of darkness she could trust. The air inside was cold and smelt of dust. The walls echoed with old memories. Zira remembered this place. Long ago, she had hunted rebels here. Now she was hiding with one. The irony was not lost on her. Still, she moved forward without pause. Rian followed closely. He had never been underground like this. You sure this is safe? He asked. Zira's voice was firm. Safer than the surface. At least here I know the paths and the traps. He swallowed hard. Traps? She smiled faintly. They moved deep into the tunnels until they found a side room, small, shielded, dry. Zira sealed the metal door behind them and set down a heat orb. The light was soft, warm, and flickered like fire. Rian sat down slowly, tired but alive. Zira sat across from him, cross-legged, watching him. Why are you not afraid of me? She asked. Rian looked at her glowing eyes. Because you saved me. She shook her head. I also killed your people. He nodded. But you didn't kill me. And you had the chance. She lowered her eyes. Something inside her twisted. She didn't like remembering the faces. But his face stayed with her. Not because of fear, because of something else. Something she had never known before. Something fragile and dangerous. Rian leaned forward. Whatever they made you into, Zira, you're not bound to that anymore. You're free. She raised her head slowly. Free, she repeated, like it was a word she had never used. I don't know what to do with that. He reached out and gently touched her hand. Her skin was cool, smooth, marked by faint glowing lines. She didn't pull away. Then let's find out together, he said. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a weapon. She felt like someone worth saving. Asterisk. The tunnels grew colder the deeper they went. Zara led with quiet steps, her eyes catching every small shift in the air, every echo, every sound of dripping water. The silence between her and Rian was no longer uncomfortable. It was shared. Rian trusted her now without words. He watched how she moved, how she paused near collapsed supports and scanned for motion sensors. She wasn't just an assassin anymore. She was his guide through a dead world. And she chose to be beside him, in one of the wider caverns. They found old rebel supplies, faded blankets, sealed boxes, even a cracked power cell still holding a weak charge. Zara activated a small light node and placed it on the wall. The room glowed in soft amber. Rian sat on a flat stone and rubbed his hands together. "This isn't the worst place I've hidden," he said with a half smile. Zara raised an eyebrow. "How many places have you hidden?" He shrugged. "Enough to learn that dark caves are better than open fields when you're being hunted." She nodded. "You've seen more war than your face suggests," he chuckled. "And you've seen more peace than your reputation suggests." Her expression changed. The smile faded. Her eyes looked away. "I've never seen peace. I've only heard stories." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What do Virelians tell children? Do they have bedtime stories?" She shook her head. "They don't tell stories, they assign targets. Lessons are about obedience, not dreams." There was a long pause. Rian watched the light flicker on her face. "Do you ever think about who you could have been?" She stayed still for a moment. "No, there was never time. They trained me from the first breath. I never had a name of my own until I picked one." "What does Zara mean?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. "It means silent wind in the old tongue. Because I killed without sound. But sometimes I wonder if that's all I am." "It's not," Rian said firmly. "You're more than what they used you for." She looked up. His words hit like sparks in dry wood. Slow to catch, but dangerous once they did. For the first time, she didn't feel hollow inside. Suddenly, a distant sound reached her ears, a high-pitched echo from the upper tunnels. Her expression turned sharp. "They're close," she whispered. Rian stood. "How many?" Zara pressed 2 fingers to the floor and listened. 3 scouts. Light armor, fast. Meant to report, not fight. "We can't stay here," he said. Zara grabbed her blade and nodded. "There's a shaft up ahead. Vertical exit. Hard to climb, but I can lift you." Rian didn't argue. He had learned by now that if she made a plan, it would work. They moved quickly, silent through the stone paths. The scouts hadn't seen them yet. But the longer they stayed, the higher the risk. Zara's fingers touched the walls like she was reading them. Every part of this tunnel had a memory for her. They reached the shaft, a narrow, jagged cylinder. Carved into the rock, a broken ladder hung along one side. Zara motioned for Rian to step into the gap. "Wrap your arms around me," she said. He hesitated. "You sure?" She looked him in the eyes. "I'm not fragile." He wrapped his arms around her. She hooked her boots into the wall grooves and began climbing, fast and sure. Her strength was shocking. She moved like a spider up the stone. Rian held on, trying not to shift his weight too much. Halfway up, a flash of light shot from below. A scout had seen them. Plasma hit the wall near their feet. Zara's grip tightened. She pushed harder, faster, until they reached the top ledge. She rolled them both into cover just as another blast flew past. Breathing hard, she looked back. "Down. They'll climb after us soon," she said. Rian coughed and nodded. "We need distance." Zara pointed to a broken steel hatch. "That leads to the old rail lines." They'll have trouble tracking heat signatures there. They moved again, this time faster, less careful. The sound of boots behind them echoed louder. Zara pulled Rian into a narrow duct and sealed it with a magnetic clamp. Darkness swallowed them for a moment before her wrist light blinked on. The air was tight. Rian could feel her breathing beside him. He whispered, "You always this calm while being chased?" Zara replied, "Calm keeps you alive. Panic kills." "Faster than bullets," he nodded. "I'll try to remember that." They crawled forward, inch by inch, until the duct ended in a small maintenance bay. Zara kicked the panel loose and helped Rian out first. Then she followed and resealed the vent behind them. The room was filled with rusted crates and wires hanging like vines. Zara motioned for silence. She tilted her head and listened. No more steps above. The scouts had lost the trail for now. "But not for long. We need transport," she said. "There was a rail cart hidden down here during the revolt. If the power core still works, we can escape the range of their sensors." Rian followed her through the debris, stepping over collapsed beams. His shoulder brushed hers once, and she didn't pull away. "You're risking everything," he said quietly. "Why?" Zara stopped and looked at him. "Because someone finally made me feel like more than a ghost." They found the cart, buried under sheets of scrap. Zara ripped the cover away and exposed the control panel. It was old but intact. She connected the power cell they had taken earlier and watched it flicker to life. "Get in," she said. Rian climbed inside. Zara sat beside him and typed in coordinates. The rail line whined, then began to move. The cart lurched forward, speeding into the dark. Zara held the side rail, her eyes fixed ahead. Rian looked at her profile. Her face was focused, strong, and strangely peaceful. "You're not what I expected from the galaxy's deadliest assassin," he said. She didn't look at him, but she smiled for the second time. The rail cart rattled through the darkness, its lights flickering as they passed through old metal tunnels and crumbling stone. The air grew warmer the farther they went, a sign that they were nearing one of the deep thermal vents beneath the planet's surface. Zara stayed alert, eyes scanning every turn, every vibration. She didn't trust peace when it came too easily. Peace was a trap she had never learned to relax in. But beside her sat a man who saw peace as something worth chasing, even if it cost everything. Rian leaned against the side panel, his hand gripping the rail to steady himself. "Where does this tunnel lead?" he asked. Zara replied without taking her eyes off the shadows ahead. "To the forgotten sectors, old rebel storage hubs, buried and ignored by the Empire. Will they be looking there?" he asked. "Eventually," she said, "but not right away. They'll assume we took a surface route. They still think like hunters. I think like prey that stopped running." Rian glanced at her. "You still consider yourself prey?" She hesitated. "Not anymore, but I used to be, trained to obey. Punished for hesitation. Freedom is a language I'm still learning." The cart screeched around a curve. Lights sparked above. Dust filled the air. They ducked low as metal beams passed close over their heads. The path was narrowing. Zara gripped the brake handle. "We're close. Prepare to jump." "Jump?" Rian asked. "Isn't that dangerous?" Zara looked at him. "More dangerous to stay in a moving target." The cart was heading into a collapsed section. They wouldn't make it through. She counted down. 3, 2, 1. Now, they leapt together. The cart slammed into a fallen wall and exploded. In sparks, Rian rolled and coughed hard as dust filled his mouth. Zara landed in a crouch, already checking the shadows. Her reflexes were perfect, but her concern was for him. "You hurt?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just scratched." She pulled him up and moved toward a side tunnel. It was narrow but still stable. Faint lights blinked in the distance. Zara whispered, "That's the rebel base. We can rest there." They stepped inside a forgotten chamber lit by old lamps. Crates lined the walls. Broken gear, uniforms, field kits. A reminder of battles fought long ago. Zara walked to a central console and wiped off the dust. "Still has power," she said. Rian leaned over her shoulder. "Can we contact anyone from here?" Zara frowned. "We could. But if we send a signal, the Empire will trace it. And I won't let them find you because of me." He nodded. "Then we wait, regroup, think." She looked at him. "You trust me with your life?" He answered without pause. "Yes, I already have." Zara sat beside a cracked wall panel and pulled off her gloves. Her fingers were marked with old scars, lines of memory carved into skin. Rian noticed. "Do they hurt?" She shook her head. "Not anymore. Pain was the first thing they taught us to ignore." He took one of her hands gently. She didn't. "Pull away. You don't have to ignore it now," he said. "You can feel it. You can feel everything." Zara looked at him with wide eyes. No one had ever said that to her before. Then a sound echoed from the outer tunnel. Not machines. Not scouts, footsteps, many. Zara's eyes narrowed. "They found us faster than I thought. They must have tracked the cart explosion." She stood instantly, blades ready. "Stay behind me," she said. Rian grabbed a blaster from one of the crates. "Not a chance. We stand together." Zara didn't argue. She just nodded. The tunnel door exploded inward. Dust and fire burst through the opening. Shapes moved in the smoke-dark armor. Glowing visors, Varelian elite hunters. Zara stepped forward with both blades drawn. Her voice was calm. "You shouldn't have come here." The first hunter charged. She spun low, slicing across his knee. He fell, and she drove the second blade into his chest. Another came from the left. She ducked, flipped over him, and struck fast. Her movements were faster than thought. Rian fired from cover, hitting one in the shoulder. The blast didn't kill, but it dropped him. Zara moved like wind and lightning. Every strike was precise. She didn't show mercy, but she didn't lose control either. Two more rushed forward. One fired a pulse weapon. Zara threw a blade through his neck. The second fired at Rian. The bolt grazed his arm. He winced and fell back. Zara saw the blood and lost her breath for half a second. She moved faster than she ever had. Her blade met the enemy's throat before he could fire again. Then silence. Dust settled. All the hunters lay still. Zara rushed to Rian and dropped beside him. "You're bleeding," she said. He smiled weakly. "It's not deep. I'm still breathing." She pressed a cloth to the burn. Her hands trembled. "If I hadn't," he stopped her. "You did. You saved me again." Zara looked into his eyes. "I don't want to see you die because of me." He placed a hand over hers. "Then don't leave. Whatever comes, we face it together." Number. More running alone. She didn't speak. She leaned her forehead against his. Her voice came soft. "I was never supposed to care. But I do, and I don't want to stop." Asterisk. The room was filled with silence after the last hunter fell. Only the low hum of the lights and Rian's soft breaths broke the stillness. Zara crouched beside him, wiping blood from his arm with a cloth torn from her own cloak. Her hands were no longer the hands of a killer. They moved like someone who cared. Rian watched her with tired eyes. "You're changing," he said. Zara paused. "Into what?" He smiled faintly. "Into someone who fights for something real, not just for orders." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded once. They stayed there a while, unmoving. Outside, the Empire's search parties would be regrouping. The scouts were likely already reporting back. But inside the chamber, something unspoken had settled between them. It wasn't fear. It wasn't duty. It was something deeper. "We can't stay here," Zara finally said. "They'll return with more, stronger forces. We need to reach the edge of the neutral zone." Rian sat up straighter. "There's a rebel camp in the dunes north of here. If we make it past the ridgeline, they won't be able to track us underground." Zara helped him stand. "We move at first light. You'll need rest." Rian shook his head. "I'll rest when we're free." She raised an eyebrow. "You're starting to sound like me," he grinned. "Maybe you're a bad influence." They made a small fire, using pieces from the broken crates. The warmth was weak but enough. Zara sat close, her armor glinting under the flickering light. Rian leaned against the wall beside her. "Back when you were still following orders, did you ever imagine this moment?" he asked. She stared into the flame. "No, I never imagined anything. Imagination was discouraged. Hope was forbidden. Feeling was weakness." She looked at him. "You made me break every rule I was raised on." "Do you regret it?" he asked. Her answer was clear. No. For the first time she spoke it without hesitation. She didn't feel guilt. She felt clarity. A quiet knowing that she had finally chosen her own path. They slept in turns. Zara stayed awake most of the night, watching the shadows. Old instincts didn't fade so easily. But as Rian slept peacefully beside her, she realized she no longer felt like a tool of the Empire. She felt like someone guarding something worth protecting. When the first light came through the cracks above, they moved, fast and silent. Zara took the lead. She knew the tunnel system better than any map. They passed beneath ruins, through old war chambers and rusted platforms. The past surrounded them like ghosts. Hours passed before they reached the lower cliffs. A faint breeze carried sand into the tunnel mouth. They had made it close to the surface. Zara raised her hand in motion for Rian to stop. She sensed something ahead. Two Varelian sentinels stood at the exit. Fully armed, heavy rifles, waiting. Zara scanned their positions. "They've been stationed here to stop anyone escaping. This is not random." Rian checked his blaster. "Can we go around?" She shook her head. "Only path leads through them. But they're not expecting both of us to be trained." He looked at her. "You've been protecting me the whole way. Let me protect you now." She gave him a look that held both warning and admiration, then nodded. "We strike together, swift, silent." He nodded back. Side by side, they crept forward, low against the stone. The moment the wind shifted, Zara moved. Her blade flew in a perfect arc, striking one in the throat. Rian shot the second in the leg. The sentinel dropped his weapon, and Zara finished the job in silence. After dragging the bodies into the rocks, they stepped into the sunlight. The dunes stretched for miles. Gold and red sand painted the land like waves frozen in time. Zara blinked under the sun. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Rian stood beside her. "So are you." She turned toward him. Her eyes were soft. "You say that every time you look at me." He smiled. "Because it's true every time." They walked for hours across the sand. Heat burned overhead, but they didn't stop. They drank from the rebel canteens and shared small pieces of food. Even without words, there was trust now. A bond not forged by war, but by choice. By late afternoon, the dunes broke into a canyon. Zara recognized the signs. Faint rebel markings, carved into the stone. "We're close. They won't fire if they see me with you." Rian looked down the path. "Let's go home." But just before they entered the canyon, the sky cracked with thunder. A Varelian gunship burst from the clouds. Massive, loud, its weapons charged, targeting them instantly. Zara grabbed Rian and pulled him down behind. "A ridge, run to the canyon, I'll distract them," she said. Rian shook his head. "Not without you," she pushed him. "Go, you're the reason I chose to live." "Don't let them take that from me." She stood tall, blades drawn. The gunship opened fire. She sprinted across the sand, dodging the blasts. Fast, graceful, untouchable. Every move defied gravity. Her focus was pure fire. She wasn't fighting to kill. She was fighting to protect. The gunship turned to follow her, ignoring Rian. He ran into the canyon. The rebels, alerted by the fire, pulled him in. "She's still out there," he said, out of breath. "She's saving all of us." Zara jumped onto a ledge, hurled her blade into the ship's engine vent. Flames burst out. The gunship shook violently, spiraling toward the cliffs. She dove from the edge as the explosion lit the sky. Then silence fell across the desert once more. Smoke curled high above the canyon. The rebels stood at the edge, weapons ready, scanning the broken skies. Below, the wreckage of the Varelian gunship burned hot and silent. Rian pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on the flames. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. His heart pounded with fear. Zara had been there. She had jumped into the fire. The assassin who once ended lives without mercy had sacrificed herself to save his. That thought tore through him like a blade. Then a figure moved. Through the smoke, limping, arm burned, hair streaked with ash. Zara. Her body was bruised, armor cracked, but she was alive. She carried one of her blades in one hand, dragging it behind her like a shadow of her old self. Rian ran to her and caught her before she fell. She leaned into him, barely able to stand. "You came back," he said, his voice raw. She whispered, "I told you I wouldn't let them take you." The rebels surrounded them, stunned. Whispers moved fast. Some aimed weapons, unsure if she was still an enemy. Rian turned toward them. "She's not a threat. She saved me. She destroyed the ship. She's with us now." One of the rebel captains stepped forward. A tall woman, with sharp eyes and a scarred face. "That's a Varelian elite. One of the worst. Why should we trust her?" Rian didn't hesitate. "Because I do. And if you've ever trusted me, then trust her too." The captain stared at Zara, then gave a short nod. "We'll watch her, but if she turns, she dies." Zara looked at her with tired eyes. "If I turn, I'll end myself before you ever need to." They brought her into the canyon. The medics treated her burns. The rebels gave her water. Rian never left her side. He stayed close as she healed, watching over her the way she once watched over him. The woman who once moved like death now rested like a survivor. Days passed. The Empire searched but found nothing. The canyon was shielded, hidden. The war raged on in the skies above, but below, something new had begun. Zara sat near the fire. With Rian, her eyes no longer glowing from cold rage, but from warmth. "I don't understand why you risked everything for me," she said one night. Rian looked at her. "Because you were worth saving." She shook her head. "I wasn't, but I wanted to be. And now I don't want to go back to who I was." "You won't," he said. "Not as long as I'm here." Zara reached out and touched his hand. Her grip was gentle now, not the grip of a soldier, not the grip of a weapon, but of someone learning what it meant to hold and not to harm. The rebels began to accept her. Slowly, they watched her train. They saw her protect the young ones during drills. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it changed the air around her. Her eyes, once feared across the galaxy, now brought comfort. One evening, the captain approached them. "We need someone to lead a mission into Varelian space." They won't expect one of their own to be working with us. Zara stood without question. I'll go. I know how they think. I know how to strike without being seen. Rian stood too. Then I'm going with her. The captain raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? He nodded. She saved my life. More than once. I owe her everything. And we work better as one. They were given supplies, maps, and coded transmitters. As the sun dipped below the canyon edge, Zara turned to Rian. I used to believe I was created only for death. But now I believe I was created to protect something better. Rian smiled and stepped closer. You're not alone anymore. She looked at him, and for the first time, let the armor fall from her voice. You made me human. You didn't break me, you healed me. Their mission would take them into the heart of danger. But this time, it wasn't just survival that drove them. It was purpose. Together, they moved through the canyon, side by side, carrying the weight of two broken pasts made whole. When the stars lit up above them, Rian paused and looked at her. Zara, if I don't make it back, she stopped him with a touch. On his lips, you will. We both will. Because this time, we're not running from who we are. We're walking toward who we can become. And then she kissed him. Not like a weapon. Not like a warrior. But like someone who had waited a lifetime to feel what it meant to be seen and loved.